Okay, so the next step on your project is you are actually going to drill a blind hole. So that means the hole that doesn't go all the way through a component. Blind holes are really common, especially for engines, so cylinder heads, things like that. It's a blind hole that means the bolt can't go all the way through. So before we start any drilling, especially in metal, we have to create a center punch, or a dent in essence. So I have my center punch here. I'm gonna have my spot where I want to drill my hole. I want to go basically halfway between this piece here. I can take my hammer and give it one good shot. That's all you can see is that nice little dent, a little dimple in the metal. That's all you need. You're not creating a hole with the center punch, just a starting point. If you look at the very tip of the drill bit, it has a point that fits nice and snug inside that space there. So I have my spot here. What I'm gonna do is make sure that tip rests nice inside there. We're gonna add some cutting oil. Okay, so we're just gonna add our cutting oil. We just need a couple drops, nothing, don't need to flood it. Take the tip again, we're gonna place it inside the little dimple so it doesn't move back and forth. And we're looking for a nice steady downward pressure. Don't lean and put your entire body weight on this. Make sure you're going in a forward direction. This is a right-handed drill bit. If it was left-handed, of course, we'd have to go in the opposite direction. But nice steady pressure as we're going down. Make sure you're going as straight as possible. We don't want to be doing one of these, like this. Nice and even, and pull the trigger. All right, so we want to go just about halfway down the piece of metal here. If you find that it's slowing down, you can add a couple more drops of cutting oil. Just a little bit further down. All right, so these pieces of metal will be hot, so make sure that you don't use your bare hand to try and clear those off. The next step, what we're gonna do is actually add threads into the hole itself. So I have something called a tap. We identified taps when we were looking at our Tool ID project. So a tap has threads that can actually cut the inside, the hole, or threads inside a hole, where a die creates threads on the outside of a component. So a die creates threads on the outside, so like a stud or a rod. A tap that looks like this, it cuts threads on the inside of a hole. To utilize a tap, you have something called a tap handle. You can notice the square end on this. It fits nice and snug inside that space there. Okay, so I have my tap, and this is my tap handle. The tap slides into the space here. You open that up and sits nice and snug inside here. The one side is like an anvil, it stays in place. The opposite side basically turns in and holds my tap in place. Make sure you don't have it sticking out too far. If you do, you potentially are pinching it or grabbing it onto the outside of the rounded piece. You want it to hold onto the square piece here. You want to get another couple drops of cutting oil because you're cutting brand new threads inside here. A key point as to why we make sure we're nice and straight down. If my drill bit was doing one of these, the top of the hole can end up being oblong or really wide open and make it really hard to start a tap inside there. So a tap, you'll notice this is a tapered tap. It has a little taper on the end of it rather than a flat bottom. The taper allows me to get started inside the hole. So what we want to do is get it nice and nestled, as straight up and down. We don't want to tilt either way. We want some downward pressure, and we start rotating. We are creating right-hand threads, so we want to make sure we are going in that clockwise direction, nice and easy. You want to feel it starting to grab. Once it starts grabbing and cutting, what we want to do is for every full turn that you do, you go back half a turn. We're going to rotate around, and we back it up. You can probably maybe hear that noise as I turn. It's hard to hear, but you can actually see and hear the threads being cut. Nice inside that little gap there. The reason why we back up is all the threads are getting caught inside the sharp pieces that are actually cutting the threads. I back up and it goes down these little channels, allowing them to clear out the debris. If I didn't clear it out and I just keep turning, what happens is this gets nice and rigid, and if I keep turning, I end up breaking this thing off inside the hole. We back up, we turn. This is aluminum, so it's not too hard to cut threads inside it. We back up. If you feel like you're putting a whole lot of muscle inside this, you're probably not backing up enough. We hit our bottom and we back out. It should be pretty smooth to back this thing out. We back up. If you look at the bottom of my tap, you can see all the pieces of thread that I've created inside there. If we look inside the hole, you can see that there's now threads cut inside there. And what we can do is just clear out some of the debris. If you had an air blower or something like that, you can do that as well. You can take this out. Make sure it's clear as much as possible before we stick a bolt or anything else inside there. I'm going to mount it back up so you guys can see it. I can take a bolt and now install the bolt into the threads. And so now I have a threaded bolt.